She didn't mean to walk into that boardroom. In fact, she wasn't even supposed to be on that floor. But with trembling hands, a crooked name tag, and a scar she always hid beneath her hair, Emily Parker pushed open the wrong door and came face to face with the billionaire CEO of the company. The room went still. Every executive turned. And in that breathless silence, one mistake turned into a moment neither of them would forget. Most interns spend their first day hoping not to be noticed. Emily? She became the whisper echoing through every hallway. The intern with the scar. The one who spoke up. The one who fainted from exhaustion and was carried by the CEO himself. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. She wasn't just a charity case. She wasn't just a story. She was about to become the heart of a movement that would change lives, burn survivors, outcasts, forgotten children, because one person dared to see her fully. And in a world that often tells people like her to stay quiet, she did something radical. She spoke. And the world listened. Emily Parker had perfected the art of invisibility. Her days began early, always 15 minutes before the rest of the office arrived. She'd slip through the front doors of Grayson and Cole Global, shoulders slightly hunched, her blonde hair carefully parted to the left to hide the faint scar that curved beneath her eye. The mark had been there since she was 6, a childhood accident, a spilled kettle, and a moment that seared not just her skin, but her self-worth. She never spoke of it. Never corrected anyone when they assumed she was just shy. She wasn't. She had opinions. Ideas. Fire. But after years of being teased for her burn line and asked if she used makeup wrong, Emily learned that silence kept you safe. Her internship at Grayson and Cole was supposed to be a fresh start. A clean slate. A quiet chance to prove herself, not to the world, but to herself. Just survive the 3 months. Stay quiet, stay useful, and maybe, just maybe, they'd let her stay. But on day 1, that plan fell apart. Because she stepped into the wrong meeting room. The walls were glass, the chairs leather, the lighting cold and unforgiving. And at the head of the table sat Ethan Grayson, CEO, Forbes cover regular, and a man whose presence alone made junior executives stammer. Every head turned. Emily's breath hitched. Her voice cracked as she stammered an apology, clutching her tote bag like a life vest. I think I'm in the wrong. But she didn't finish the sentence. Because Ethan Grayson didn't look at her the way she expected. He didn't sigh or dismiss her with a hand wave. He didn't scoff or roll his eyes. Instead, he studied her quietly, curious. His expression unreadable. Not cold. Not warm. Just still. As if he were trying to place a face he'd never seen but couldn't forget. Emily backed out of the room as fast as she could, cheeks burning. That was supposed to be it. A moment. A blip. A wrong door, a quick exit, and back to her desk in the far corner of the marketing floor. But the whispers came. By lunchtime, someone had already told someone else who had told someone else that the new intern walked straight into the exec boardroom like she owned the place. By Thursday, her name was circulating in side eyes and smirks, followed by phrases like bold move, scar girl, and CEO's new favorite. Emily kept her head down, but the tension clung to her like static. She could feel it, on the elevator, in the break room, in the way 2 junior associates would fall quiet when she entered a room. And it wasn't just the scar. It was everything they didn't understand. They didn't see the hours she put in. How she double-checked every campaign spreadsheet, corrected grammar in drafts she wasn't even assigned, or stayed late organizing samples for the next client demo. They didn't know she skipped lunch most days, not to starve herself, but because the cafeteria stairs felt heavier than hunger. They didn't see how hard she worked because they weren't looking. Except Ethan Grayson. Somehow, he noticed. He passed her desk one afternoon. Didn't say a word. Just nodded once, paused as if to speak, then walked on. Another day, she found an extra set of data metrics in her inbox, sent from his assistant per Mr. Grayson's request. No subject. No message. Just numbers that matched exactly what she'd been quietly researching. It unnerved her. Made her nervous. Because attention had never been safe for someone like her. It had always come with strings. With cruelty. With questions like, how'd you get that? Or worse, were you in a fire? Even the compliments felt sharp. You're pretty, if not for that, you'd be stunning with better skin. You should really try dermabrasion. So she covered it. Not just the scar, but herself. Long sleeves, even in summer. No makeup. No selfies. No birthday posts. Just existence in low resolution. But somehow, it wasn't enough. Because people had started noticing her anyway, and not always kindly. In the elevator one morning, two interns giggled as they reviewed a company group photo posted to LinkedIn. Guess who cropped herself out again? One whispered. Emily. She's like a ghost. Later, outside the restroom, she overheard, if she's trying to get the CEO's attention, she might want to try not looking like a trauma patient. The words hit hard, not because they were original, but because they were familiar. Still, she said nothing. She took it in, carried it, buried it like she always had. But something was shifting. And it wasn't just in her. It was in the way Ethan looked at her, not with pity, but with interest. Respect. As if he saw something beneath the surface everyone else ignored. But that attention came at a cost. Because in an office full of ambition, envy is the currency. And suddenly, the quiet intern was no longer invisible. She was a target. The truth is, Emily never planned to speak. Not that day. Not in that room. Her name had only been added to the meeting invite as an afterthought. An observer role. Just sit, take notes, absorb the atmosphere of high-stakes corporate strategy. Smile if someone makes eye contact. Blend in. That's what she told herself as she sat quietly in the corner of conference room B17, far from the sleek glass walls of the executive boardroom she had accidentally wandered into weeks earlier. This room was different. Fancier than where marketing usually met, yes, but it was still far from her territory. Her job was to listen. To learn. To be invisible, professionally. Until she couldn't be. The meeting was about a new campaign for the company's biggest skincare client. Sleek packaging. Clean slogans. Minimalist design. Timeless beauty was the pitch. The head of marketing, a sharp-tongued woman named Diane, delivered the presentation with the grace of a Broadway lead, gliding through slides, voice steady, eyes confident. But Emily felt something. A thrum. A pulse. A quiet wrongness that grew with every word. The tagline was elegant, sure. The visuals were tasteful. But the message? It excluded people like her. Not just burn survivors, but anyone with a face the world had deemed imperfect. Emily flipped through the campaign handouts in front of her. She'd run data the night before, just for herself, on emerging Gen Z preferences in beauty branding. Authenticity. Rawness. Real skin, real bodies, real stories. And this campaign? It missed the mark by a mile. Her hand moved before her brain caught up. It was in the air. Raised. Uninvited. Diane's voice faltered mid-slide. The room fell silent. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Her palms were slick. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice quiet but clear. But I think this direction might alienate the audience we're actually trying to reach. The silence deepened. One man near the window leaned forward. Diane arched an eyebrow. Someone across the table coughed. Then, go on, said Ethan Grayson. Emily's eyes met his. He wasn't annoyed. He wasn't even surprised. Just open. He wanted to hear her. She stood, because sitting felt too exposed, and began. Timeless beauty is aspirational, she said. But our data shows that Gen Z doesn't trust aspirational anymore. They want inclusion. Honesty. They want to see someone like them on the billboard, not a filtered fantasy. Campaigns that emphasize story over symmetry? They're outperforming traditional ads by 36% in digital engagement. Especially when it comes to skincare. She lifted her handouts, flipping to a chart she'd printed from her own research. This compares 3 campaigns from last quarter. The ones that highlighted scars, texture, freckles, anything real, saw deeper comments, longer viewing times, and stronger brand loyalty. The room was still. But her hands weren't shaking. For once. Diane blinked. And, you gathered this when? Emily hesitated. Last night. It wasn't part of my assignment, I was curious. That's when Ethan spoke again. Calm. Measured. Commanding. Thank you, Emily. He looked at the team. Any objections to pivoting the campaign concept? No one answered. Then, turning back to her, I want you to lead the revision. The words hit like lightning. Emily stared, stunned. Me? You've got the insight, he said. And the courage to speak when it mattered. Let's see where that leads. The meeting adjourned in a daze of murmurs. People congratulated her, but not all the smiles reached their eyes. Some were tight. Some skeptical. Some resentful. But Emily barely noticed. She had just been heard. She had walked into that room as a shadow. And walked out as something else entirely. A week later, her desk overflowed with pitch mock-ups, revised slide decks, and back-and-forth email threads with the design team. She buried herself in data, poring over metrics until midnight. She skipped lunch again. And dinner. She double-checked every image for inclusivity. Fact-checked every claim. She rehearsed her presentation so many times her throat grew raw. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. This was her chance, not just to prove herself, but to tell a story the world needed to hear. One that didn't erase people like her. The day before the client pitch, she stayed late again. By 9:30 p.m., the office was empty. She was alone in the conference room, her laptop humming, eyes burning from screen glare. The world tilted slightly. She blinked. Her fingers slipped off the keyboard. And then... darkness. The security guard found her first. Slumped over. Pale. Dehydrated. Her heart rate was elevated. Her breath shallow. By the time Ethan arrived, having been called by the building manager, she was already being helped onto the office cot by the nurse. But he didn't leave. He stayed. Sat beside her as she slept, head in hands, guilt carving into his chest. He'd seen her exhaustion. Noticed the darkening under her eyes. The growing tremble in her hands. And he had said nothing. Before he left that night, he called the kitchen. Something warm. Mild, no spices. Like rice porridge, he said. Like comfort food. And then he wrote a note. Just one sentence. Take care of yourself, Emily. You matter. When she woke hours later, the porridge was still warm. So was the note. She clutched it to her chest and cried. Not because she had collapsed. But because, for the first time, someone saw her fall and didn't walk away. The next morning, Emily sat at her desk, legs still weak, the aftertaste of that warm rice porridge lingering on her tongue like a memory. She hadn't meant to faint. She hadn't wanted anyone, especially not him, to see her like that. But someone had. And he didn't look away. Instead, Ethan Grayson had carried her like she weighed nothing, though she knew she was full of more than just exhaustion. Shame, fear, years of unspoken hurt. Somehow, he carried all of it. And then he left her a note. Not a text. Not an email. A note. Folded. Handwritten. Real. She must have read it 20 times. Take care of yourself, Emily. You matter. It wasn't flowery. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the first time anyone, boss, teacher, boyfriend, foster parent, had said those words to her. You matter. She tucked the note into her coat pocket like armor and walked back into the office with a quiet strength she hadn't felt before. But not everyone welcomed her return. Whispers began almost immediately. Some employees offered tight, polite nods. Others didn't hide their glances. Or their side comments. And then came the moment that shattered her composure. She had walked past the break room on her way to refill her water bottle. The door was ajar. She wasn't eavesdropping, she wasn't even trying to listen. But she heard her name. She's not even pretty, said a voice, cold, dismissive. It belonged to Olivia, one of the senior associates. Scar on her face. Barely talks. Walks into a meeting once and suddenly she's leading projects? Another voice snickered. Brian, from finance. Maybe fainting in front of the CEO is the new power move. Or sleeping with him, Olivia added. I mean, seriously, he carried her. Carried. Like a rom-com. Their laughter echoed like a slap. Emily froze. Her hand trembled around the glass. She should have walked in and said something. Or slammed the door. Or made some sharp, unforgettable remark like in the movies. But she didn't. She turned. She walked away. Straight into the stairwell, where she sat on the third step and cried silently into her coat sleeve, the scar on her cheek burning, not from shame, but from fury. They didn't see her. Not really. They saw a weakness. A mistake. A girl with a burn who dared to stand in the light. By that night, she'd drafted the email. Subject line, thank you and goodbye. She read it 3 times before pressing send. No theatrics. Just an exit. Clean, quiet, like she always tried to be. But Ethan saw it. He opened the email at 6:42 a.m. The minute his assistant handed him the morning roundup. By 9 a.m., Olivia and Brian were called into the HR conference room. At 9:05, Ethan walked in. Not as the composed, charming executive the media loved. But as a man who had just reached his limit. You represent this company, he said, voice flat, cold steel under velvet. Not just in your performance, but in your character. They started to explain. Joke. Deflect. He didn't flinch. Mocking someone's appearance? Spreading personal rumors? That's not just unprofessional, it's inhumane. Brian shifted in his seat. We didn't mean anything. You did, Ethan cut in. And you're done here. Effective immediately. Then he turned to HR, full severance. But I don't want their names associated with this brand ever again. The room fell silent. That same hour, he found Emily in the 8th floor lounge. She was curled on the couch with her laptop, trying to pretend the email had never been sent. He approached quietly. She looked up. Eyes tired. Fingers clenched. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know it's been messy. He shook his head. Sat beside her. It's not your job, he said gently, to shrink so others feel tall. She blinked. looked down at her lap. They said, she hesitated, her voice cracking, they said no one would ever take me seriously. Not with this face. Ethan's expression changed, not with pity, but with something deeper. He reached out slowly, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers paused just lightly on her cheek, where the scar curved toward her jaw. This scar, he said, voice low, doesn't make you less beautiful. It makes you unforgettable. Emily's breath hitched. He didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Didn't offer sympathy. He offered truth. It's part of you, he said, but it's not all of you. And I see every part. Something inside her broke open. Not in pain, but in relief. No one had ever said that. Not once. And now someone had. She reached up, touched the hand still resting gently on her cheek. I don't want to quit, she whispered. Good, Ethan replied. And that was the moment everything shifted. She wasn't just seen. She was valued. Not despite her scar, but with it. The ballroom shimmered. Crystal chandeliers rained soft light over round tables dressed in white linen and glass centerpieces filled with wildflowers and soft yellow candles. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, philanthropists, medical professionals, burn survivors and their families, even journalists from national outlets. At the far end of the Grand Caldwell Center stage, a simple banner stretched across the back wall. New skin, new hope, a future without shame. And standing behind the velvet curtain, trembling with nerves and fire, was Emily Parker. She was no longer the quiet intern from the back row. Tonight, she was the voice for children who had been told they'd never be beautiful. Tonight, she was the face of the program she helped create. She smoothed the hem of her dark blue satin dress, the neckline just high enough to feel safe, just low enough to show she wasn't hiding anymore. Her scar, faint but still visible under the soft lighting, curved beneath her left eye like a signature. Ethan Grayson appeared beside her, dressed in a black tux, the bow tie slightly undone. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You remember why this matters, he said softly. Just speak from the truth. She nodded, blinking back the emotion rising in her chest. Her name was called. Applause rippled through the room as Emily stepped onto the stage. She stood at the podium, took a breath, and began. Good evening, she said, voice shaky but clear. My name is Emily Parker. I'm the director of the New Skin, New Hope initiative. And once, I was just a girl with a scar who didn't believe she belonged anywhere. She paused, scanning the front row, where young burn survivors sat, some with bandages, some with healing skin, some with eyes wide and hopeful. She saw herself in every one of them. I used to think this scar made me less, she continued. That it told people everything they needed to know about me before I ever opened my mouth. But then, someone chose to listen. Someone looked at me and didn't see damage. He saw potential. Gasps echoed softly as slides began appearing on the screen behind her, photos of children laughing during group therapy, learning in classrooms, painting in workshops, hugging their mentors. These were the faces of the program she helped build. In 1 year, she said, we've provided medical support, confidence coaching, and scholarships to over 100 children. But this isn't about numbers. It's about belief. It's about giving someone the first chance to be seen without fear. She looked up from her speech. And tonight, I want to say to every child who's been called damaged, to every teenager who's avoided mirrors, to every adult who still flinches at their own reflection, you are more than what they see. Your story is not your scar. The room stilled. A few people in the front row wiped away tears. She closed her remarks with one final line, the same one she had whispered to herself on her darkest days. I never needed to be perfect. I only needed to be seen. Silence. Then, applause. Slow at first. Then rising. Until the entire ballroom stood. Emily stepped back from the microphone, heart pounding, tears burning the corners of her eyes. From the edge of the stage, Ethan stepped forward, clapping, eyes fixed on her like she was the only person in the room. And then, he did something no one expected. He crossed the stage. Stopped in front of her. Gently, reverently, he reached up and placed one hand on the side of her face. And kissed her scar. Soft. Deliberate. Unapologetic. A photographer's flash went off. Then another. And another. The crowd gasped. Some clapped louder. Others watched in odd silence. It wasn't performative. It wasn't romantic in a movie script way. It was a moment of recognition. Of love. Of truth. That kiss didn't say, "I feel sorry for you." It said, "I see you, and I choose you." Within hours, the photo exploded across the internet. The image of the billionaire CEO kissing the scar of a woman who once believed she had to hide became a symbol of resilience, of visibility, of redefined beauty. Headlines called it the kiss that changed the narrative. CEO honors director's scar in powerful gala moment. A love letter to imperfection and to courage. Donations to the New Skin, New Hope program tripled by morning. But none of that compared to what happened backstage. As the applause faded and the curtain closed, Ethan found her again. She turned to face him, her eyes wide, glassy. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," he replied. "Because that part of you? It's not what makes you less. It's what makes you unforgettable." She reached for his hand and held it. Not for balance, but for grounding. Because in that moment, standing on that stage, seen by the world, Emily Parker finally believed the thing she never thought possible. She was more than enough. Scar and all. It had been 1 year since that night. 1 year since a scar was kissed on stage and the world looked at a woman, really looked, and didn't turn away. In that time, Emily Parker had transformed. Not just in title, though that mattered. She was now director of global programs for New Skin, New Hope, a role that once felt galaxies away from the intern cubicle on the 22nd floor. But more than a title, she had found something far rarer, her place. Her voice, once used only in whispers or private rehearsals, now guided national initiatives. She spoke at hospitals. She consulted on curriculum with child psychologists. She developed workshops for parents who didn't know how to explain scars to their children without tears in their eyes. She wasn't just in rooms she used to feel unworthy of. She was leading them. And people were listening. The once silent intern now mentored a staff of 20, each handpicked for their empathy and vision. She personally reviewed every application to the program's Youth Scholarship Fund, often writing handwritten notes of encouragement. Because she remembered what one sentence on a scrap of paper had done for her. Take care of yourself. You matter. Now, she passed that message on, again and again, in every form she could. Her scar had become more than a part of her story. It was her signature. At first, she feared that image from the gala, the kiss, would define her. But something remarkable happened. It didn't trap her in a moment. It freed her into a movement. Letters flooded in. From girls with birthmarks on their cheeks. From veterans with burn injuries. From a boy in Ohio who wore a pressure mask after surgery and said he finally saw someone who looked like him and was still cool. Emily answered everyone. Some days, she'd sit on the floor of her office barefoot, surrounded by letters, and weep. Not from sadness, but from awe. People had seen her. And now, they saw themselves through her. One afternoon, during a board tour with city officials, a young girl, maybe 11, maybe 12, walked beside her, silent and wide-eyed. She wore long sleeves despite the summer heat. Her wrists bore the faint shimmer of skin grafts. When Emily knelt beside her and said, "You're safe here," the girl whispered back, "I know, because you look like me." It was in that moment that Emily realized she had become more than a survivor. She had become a mirror. A living, breathing reflection of hope. She no longer shied away from cameras. She no longer tilted her head in photos to hide the left side of her face. She no longer apologized for existing in a room full of people with smooth skin and polished confidence. Because now, she was the reason the room existed. Ethan Grayson still stood by her side. Not as a savior. Not as a headline. As a partner. They rarely talked about that moment on the stage. It didn't need to be dissected. It had spoken louder than any press release ever could. But every so often, as they walked the hallway between offices or left a meeting where another burn survivor had shared their story, Ethan would glance over and say, "You're changing the world." And she would smile, not because she needed his validation, but because it reminded her of the girl she used to be. The one who thought she had to shrink to fit in. Now, she was expanding the definition of beauty, of leadership, of strength. And she did it not with a spotlight, but with a soft voice, steady hands, and a heart that had learned how to heal others while still healing itself. The final measure of success wasn't in charts or applause. It was in the mural unveiled outside the Children's Burn Rehabilitation Center, a towering painting of a phoenix rising, its wings stitched with visible scars, its chest glowing with light. Beneath it, a quote written in gold. "Your story is not your scar. You are so much more." Emily stood beneath it on opening day, surrounded by survivors and parents and volunteers, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was carrying a wound. She felt like she was carrying a torch. And wherever she went next, it would be to light the way for someone else.